Hey everybody, glad to be here with all of you tonight. Should be a great late night stream. Wasn't sure that I would go live tonight, but hey, I figured why not, right? It's always better to stream than not stream. That is the general rule that I live by. So I'm glad to be here with all of you. Let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Just having yet another one of our late night streams. The way these streams work, I give my opening remarks, then followed by a roll call. And after that, I answer your questions for the rest of the night. So if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the program, by all means, super chat question or send me a Rumble rant on the Rumble. That's the way we do it. So there's that. On another announcement, as always, we have morning messages on the CPI YouTube channel every morning. This morning, we had a great YouTube super chat. We had a great morning message from Gavin. He talked about medical breakthroughs in China. He actually rapped about them. He included the video. I thought that was pretty cool. We got another one lined up for tomorrow. So tune in for the morning messages. It's a great way to stay connected with our community. And that's on the CPI YouTube channel. That's a way we are staying connected with each other. Just keeping tuned in, staying engaged. If you would I encourage you to start your day with revolutionary hope and optimism on the CPI YouTube channel. We got that right here, right? That's the link. Go and subscribe to the CPI YouTube channel. Start your day with a morning message every day. And we now have this great option where you can create a morning message. If you would like to send in a morning message to help support our community and all of that, you can do so. It's a very easy link. You can submit a morning message. So submit a morning message. Very easy to do. Submit a morning message at this link. We do need more morning messages because we're doing one every day. Please, if you got a couple minutes and you want to stay connected with our community, by all means, submit a morning message. Great way to stay engaged. So as I said before, the way this works, opening remarks, whatever it is I'm going to talk about for tonight, roll call. Then after that, I answer your super chat questions. Not sure how late I will go tonight, but I thought that it was worth checking in. So interesting. So I'm just going to jump into my opening remarks. Super chats are great for the second half, whatever. So Donald Trump and Elon Musk had a Twitter space tonight. They got on Twitter and they talked. I heard some of it, not much of it. And I actually I was focused on dealing with some other organizational matters today. But I heard about it because a friend of mine reached out to me and said that the words "no war with Iran" were trending on social media. And I looked into it, and that was because of this space that Donald Trump was having, this Twitter space with Elon Musk. and the followers of Nick Fuentes, who I don't like on a number of levels. I don't like this style of rhetoric, etc. But Nick Fuentes is anti-Israel. He's an anti-Israel conservative, and he started saying no war with Iran. And he got all of his followers to just pile on to this Twitter space to just make it say no war with Iran, no war with Iran. That's great. And I noticed that Candace Owens was saying roughly the same thing, that, the USA goes to war every time Bibi Benjamin Netanyahu wants it. I think that's a great development, that there is a significant number of people in the online section of the Trump community that want no war with Iran. So much so that they piled into Trump's spaces to say that. Now, Donald Trump talks a bad game on Iran. He talks a bad game on Iran, a bad game on Israel. And, I looked over some of what was said. I heard some of it, and I also looked over some of what was said. Donald Trump is running this line about he kept Iran in check. October 7th never would have happened, blah, 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 blah. Not helpful. We'll see what Trump does if reelected. Look, at this point, CPI, we're in an organizational transition. We're not a nonprofit anymore. We don't campaign for anybody. That's not changing, regardless of our nonprofit status. But that I will say, and I will be absolutely clear about this. I personally am not speaking for CPI. There's people in CPI who disagree with me about this, and that's fine, right? There's many anti-imperialists that I know that have different feelings about this, and we don't tell people how to vote. We don't campaign for anybody. There are people in CPI that are in various political parties, etc. So, but not speaking for CPI, just speaking for Caleb. I think Trump is clearly the lesser of two evils in this upcoming election. And that, it's interesting, that phrase, lesser of two evils, right? That's a phrase that people in third parties often attack. They say you shouldn't vote for the lesser of two evils. No, you should. You shouldn't vote for the same evil. And usually the Democrats and the Republicans are the same evil. They have basically the same message. They don't represent different factions in the ruling class. They're two heads that are competing for the support of the same people, the same bankers and donors, and that's how it generally is. This election is a little bit different. There is a clear division within the ruling class, and Donald Trump represents the lower levels of capital, but also, forces that are more solidly in with the Netanyahu wing of Israeli politics. And also, Donald Trump represents people in the Pentagon who don't want World War III and want to de-escalate, in Ukraine and elsewhere. Whereas Kamala Harris represents the color revolution, regime change apparatus of the CIA. Her niece lives in India and is trying to overthrow Modi. She is a creation of the Hillary Clinton State Department. I wrote a whole book about Kamala Harris that they were so threatened by the content of it, they removed it from Amazon for 7 days before enough outrage was generated. I go into great detail about who Kamala Harris is, and I've been doing interviews round the clock about who Kamala Harris really is, who she represents, etc. So, Kamala Harris represents the George Soros regime change color revolution apparatus. Donald Trump represents people in the Pentagon that want to not rush into World War III. It represents people that are tied in with the Netanyahu wing of Israeli politics. Donald Trump, not everyone that Donald Trump is aligning with himself is even the lower levels of capital. Keep in mind, there is, people like Elon Musk, who's a Silicon Valley tech monopolist. There's people that are just very solidly pro-Israel, that are very dangerous and want to escalate us into a war with Iran, who are backing Trump. So we don't want to act like the Trump camp is in any way pure. I do think Donald Trump is the lesser of two evils, because the Kamala Harris faction, they seem to want to outlaw dissent. They want to ban, They want to ban the January 6th, protesters. They wanted to put them in prison like you wouldn't believe. They are prosecuting the Uhuru movement. They are, at this point, they have put, Tulsi Gabbard on the terrorism watch list. The faction that is behind Kamala Harris, those people are ready to march us into an all-out authoritarian state to spread regime change chaos around the world. Donald Trump represents people that aren't so excited about that and are threatened by that on some level. And it's a mixed coalition. It's a mixed bag. So, usually Democrats and Republicans are the same evil. This is a rare moment where there is, you could say Trump is the lesser of two evils. That is my position. Now, I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump. And the reason I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump is I live in New York City. So my vote really doesn't matter. I live in the state of New York, which is going to go overwhelmingly for Biden. So my voting for Trump wouldn't do any good. It wouldn't change the outcome of the election. I would probably vote for Trump if I was in a swing state, but I think I will probably vote for a third-party candidate like I generally do, because it makes my vote count for more in a state that's going to go solidly for Biden, for Kamala Harris. For me, voting for a third-party candidate puts on record somewhere that somebody rejected the Democrats and the Republicans. I think that counts for more than just a vote for the Republicans that isn't going to matter. At the end of the day, my vote doesn't count. As somebody who is not a Democrat in New York, in the Electoral College, my vote doesn't count. All the New York votes are going to go to Kamala Harris, and that's a pre-gone conclusion. I think that Kamala Harris is the greater of two evils, and she is the most dangerous presidential candidate in the history of the country. And 4 years ago, I wrote a book about it, and I think Kamala Harris would set up, a low-wage police state, and she would march us into chaos and regime change wars. Now, that said, I heard some of what Donald Trump said on the call. And then a good friend of mine, shout out to Carter, he did send me some notes from the call. He listened to the whole thing, the Elon Musk Twitter space with Trump. And I got to say, I want to say a couple things. First things first, I would say is that I think that it's really inspiring that Donald Trump has said what he has said about Ukraine. There is no incentive for Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't get points with mainstream media, even with Fox News, for talking the way he's talking about Ukraine. But Donald Trump has doubled down on we shouldn't be spending billions of dollars over there. We should de-escalate, etc. Now, that's really good. And it shows that there is there is a widespread sentiment that has penetrated even circles of the ruling class that don't want to continue this Ukraine nonsense. That's good. Trump continues to brag about what he did, going to North Korea to meet with Kim Jong-un. And I think that was great. I think that was tremendous. I think that was the best thing that Donald Trump ever did. And North Korea has said through a diplomat that recently defected, this diplomat that recently defected from North Korea to South Korea has said that North Korea will reopen the talks under a Trump administration if Trump is reelected. The Wall Street Journal recently attacked Donald Trump for bragging about the peace on the Korean Peninsula issue. And the Wall Street Journal said Trump brags about North Korea, but the talks went nowhere. Well, we know why the talks went nowhere. The talks went nowhere because John Bolton and Mike Pompeo sabotaged them. That's why the talks went nowhere. And Donald Trump has now seen that John Bolton and Mike Pompeo have both betrayed him. They both supported the prosecution. Mike Pompeo supported Donald Trump being prosecuted over the documents at Mar-a-Lago. John Bolton left the Trump administration and went as far as saying that if Donald Trump is reelected, NATO would be disbanded. So the two people that sabotaged Trump's talks with North Korea have basically betrayed Donald Trump and turned into Donald Trump's enemies. Now, they claim to support him in the upcoming election, but Donald Trump is never going to trust them again. That's interesting to me. And I also want to say that there was one thing that Donald Trump said was very interesting. And I don't think people understand the significance of this. And honestly, there are environmentalists, there's people in my family that are going to be horrified by this. But the part of the talk that I listened to in this space was Donald Trump and Elon Musk started talking about drilling in Alaska. And how they wanted to drill in Alaska. Donald Trump said that there's more oil than Saudi Arabia, which, I mean, I don't know. I'm not an expert on petroleum geology, but I find that hard to believe. But I'm not saying it's possible. I'm not saying it's not true. I don't know. But I want to tell you, I am for drilling in Alaska. Not because I am an environmental expert. I'm sure it's probably not good for the environment. I'm not there to make that assessment. I'm for drilling in Alaska because I think that if there's any hope for world peace, this is where it's going to come from. Right? And shout out to the Schiller Institute. Shout out to Lyndon LaRouche. Shout out to Abraham Lincoln. The World Land Bridge. So if you look at this, right, you got Alaska, you got the Bering Strait that divides Alaska from Russia. Any economic development in Alaska is a step toward world peace because Russia is so close. And right now there is an explosion of economic growth going on in the Far East. In Russia, every year they have the Vladivostok Economic Forum. And Russia and China have done a huge amount of economic development in the Far East. And it would be in America's interest to drill in Alaska because that would mean that there was more economic activity in Alaska, and that would connect Alaska with Russia and with what's going on in the Far East. The more that there can be economic activity in Alaska, the more that there can be economic activity in Vladivostok, the closer we get to improving U.S.-Russia relations and not moving toward World War III. Also, this, China is there. The Korean Peninsula is not too far off. And that building the World Land Bridge or the Bering Strait Bridge potentially opens the door to economic development in this region, which could lead to world peace, right? If there's any way that we could see an improvement and that see the United States pivoting away from hostility to Russia and China, it would be through the World Land Bridge. It would be through, the Bering Strait. Peace on the Korean Peninsula is part of it. Peace with China would be part of that. I mean, that this is the way that the world can be nudged toward peace, is with the World Land Bridge, with a bridge across the Bering Strait. I'm not the only person to have recognized this. Abraham Lincoln recognized this years ago. There's been all kinds of people that have said this. And that this has been something that Russia has been an advocate of for years. They have been talking about, the idea of the Bering Strait connecting Alaska with Russia. They've been talking about this. The LaRouche movement has been talking about this. All kinds of people have talked about this. Right? It has been a long-standing thing. Many of the forces in the world that want world peace have said that a way to nudge the world in the direction of world peace would be to build the World Land Bridge and connect Russia and Alaska through the Bering Strait. And there's a big emphasis on the development of the Far East by Russia right now. The Vladivostok Economic Forum happens every year in the Far East. China is a big part of, what's going on there, and that this is really our hope. So Donald Trump saying that he will open up drilling in Alaska, I do apologize to environmental folks that are against it. It would in effect, nudge the world closer to peace, right? You have to think long term, right? I've been urging people to think long term. Personally, right? If you ask me, right? I mean, let's just think strategically, politically here. What can we do? You have to think in terms of the realistic, right? You have to think in terms of the realistic. One thing that has been kind of a pet peeve of mine, right, especially when you get into communism, is utopianism, right? Karl Marx wrote a whole, Frederick Engels wrote a whole pamphlet, Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific. Utopianism is this idea you have a blank piece of paper and you just write your blueprint for the ideal world around it, and you go around showing your blank piece of paper to people, and that's the way we improve things. Well, Marx and Engels and others said no, right? The world that is to be comes out of the world that currently is. And it's the contradictions in the world that currently is and the struggles in the world that currently are that will create the world that is to be, right? And that to some degree or other, dialectical and historical materialism, that aspect of it, I think, is correct. Now, I don't think it's always struggle. I think there can be reconciliation. I think that there can be other kinds of relationships that develop. But the notion that it is forces that currently exist and the relations between them developing over time that lead to the world, that is correct. And the way that the things in the world can improve is through the forces that currently exist, relating with each other and often clashing and confronting, but sometimes operating in other ways, moving toward a conclusion. So the only way we're going to get a better world is if we move the world as it currently exists in a better direction. And you would think that's common sense, right? But it's not, right? It's not common sense. And especially when you start talking about communism and socialism, people just want to draw up a blueprint of an ideal world and demand people sign on to it or recruit people to sign on to it. And that's not socialism. That is not the Marxist method. That is utopianism. If we want to nudge the world toward world peace and world development, one way that we can do it is by shifting the economic focus of the world in this direction. And there is a great will to do that, right? Right now, when's the last time you heard anybody talk about Alaska in America? People just pretend it doesn't exist. There was Sarah Palin, right? She talked about it. I see people referencing her in the chat. There was Sarah Palin. She talked about Alaska, and that was it. Now, one thing is there was some kind of Alaskan, libertarian group that was heavily suppressed by the American government. There's some political prisoners that are in federal prison from Alaska that they were involved in some kind of sting operation during the Obama years. They were, with guns or something like that. And that's worth taking note of. When I interviewed Victor Bout, the Russian political prisoner who recently got to go home, he was traded for Brittany Griner. When I interviewed him a few years ago, he actually said in the interview, he talked about the Alaskan independence movement and how, there is this Alaskan independence movement that's been heavily cracked down on by the American government. That's gotten almost no attention in American media. But there are a lot of business owners and landowners in Alaska who feel the federal government is oppressing them, that feel that development in Alaska is being retarded. And yes, John McCarthy is right. Mike Gravel, who was an advocate of peace, who went to Iran and advocated peace, who was a peace activist before he died. He also, was from Alaska, and he represented Alaska in the U.S. Senate. So, Alaska is a complicated thing. The orientation that leftists have toward Alaska is that it's the country, it's the wild lands, and that's where these extreme right-wing dudes with guns that are conservative live. We don't want anything to do with that, but it's more complicated than that. It is more complicated than that. And, Alaska does have a lot of oil. I don't know if it has as much as Saudi Arabia, as Trump said. I mean, I don't think Trump would lie about that, but maybe he just doesn't have his facts right. I find that hard to believe that it has as much as Saudi Arabia. But for a long time, there's been talk of opening up drilling in Alaska. I'm for it because I see that as the way to nudge the world toward peace. The more economic activity there is in Alaska, the more economic activity there is in Vladivostok, the more will there is to connect the two with each other and build the world land bridge, the more peace on the Korean Peninsula is moved toward, the more we can pivot the world in a development-oriented way. I would love to see the world economy pivot in this direction. I would love to see an explosion of jobs. I'd love to see people moving to Alaska and setting up shop there for new economic opportunities. I would love to see that, because that would be a step toward world peace. That would nudge the world in a direction where we could see peace. Now, the other thing I wanted to say is, I have been very critical of Nick Fuentes before, and I don't like anti-Semitism. I don't like any form of bigotry, right? You should never use ethnic and racial slurs. And I see Nick Fuentes as a racist. I just do, right? And I think he would openly say he is that. That said, I mean, look, I don't think that the Trump supporters are all going to listen to what some communist says, right? They're not going to listen to what some woke people say or whatever. The fact that there's enough people that have been mobilized by this racist Nick Fuentes to say no war with Iran, that's great. I mean, people with bad ideologies and bad views on a lot of things can also do good things. And no war with Iran is what needs to be screamed from the heavens among Trump supporters. So, and I mean, the communist groups, most of whom think Trump is a fascist and blindly support the Democrats, they're not going to say it. So Nick Fuentes saying no war with Iran, good, great. Candace Owens, I don't think Candace Owens is a racist. I mean, she's a black woman, but she says a lot of things about various issues that I don't agree with, but she's saying no war with Iran also. That's awesome. That's tremendous. And I mean, look, that is what needs to be said in the Trump circles, right? I am predicting, and I have predicted on these streams before, that there are three possible outcomes for the upcoming election in the United States. The first outcome is that Kamala Harris wins. And if Kamala Harris wins, there will be a lot of protesting and rebellion by Trump supporters. They will see it as a fraudulent, stolen election. And there's likely to be a very big political crackdown. That's outcome number one. That's, like, in my mind, the worst case scenario would be a Kamala Harris victory followed by some protests by Trump supporters and a big crackdown. That's worst case scenario. Most likely scenario for the upcoming election is that Donald Trump wins, right? And then the worst aspects of Trumpism are amped up by the establishment. The demonization of Iran, the demonization of Venezuela, the police state stuff, supporting, the police and wanting more police state repression and wanting to round up every single undocumented immigrant and deport, all the bad aspects of Trumpism, including the anti-Iran, pro-Israel stuff, will be amped up because this is how the ruling class operates, right? They tend to ride any wave, and they would ride the wave of Trumpism. They would try to see, okay, Trump is going to win, and so we'll ride the wave of Trumpism. By amping up the worst parts of it. That is the most likely scenario. And then I would say the best possible scenario, which I think is a long shot, but it would be amazing if it happened, would be that Donald Trump took office and won the election, but in opposition to the bulk of his class. Now that would be a long shot, but if Donald Trump took office facing all-out opposition from his own class, with the deep state pretty solidly against him, with the billionaires pretty solidly against him, with Silicon Valley and Wall Street solidly against him, but he managed to pull through. That's where some really amazing things could happen. That could be a Roosevelt or a Lincoln type situation where somebody really, you have a leader who really does have vision and has to build a mass movement in order to stay in power. And that would be the ideal situation. I think it's a long shot. I think the chances of it happening are slim, but I do see some hope. One thing is the relationship between Donald Trump and the Libertarian Party. Angela McCurdle arranged for Donald Trump to speak at the Libertarian Party convention. Donald Trump came, and Donald Trump made a deal with the Libertarians that if he wins, he will appoint a Libertarian Party member to his cabinet. Now, Donald Trump wouldn't do that if he wasn't trying to arrange a mass movement. And that's a good thing. I see some other signs of that. One of them is the prosecution of Sume Terry, right, which is awful. I don't think it's a good thing. I mean, Sume Terry, I don't agree with a lot of what she has said, but Sume Terry, for those of you who may not be familiar, is the top scholar on Korea, who was an advisor to President Bush, an advisor to President Obama, former CIA operative, and at this point, member of the Council on Foreign Relations and all that. Well, she's been arrested and charged with being a foreign agent. And it's ridiculous. I mean, it's absurd. This woman is an agent of the American government, of American imperialism. But she's been charged with being a foreign agent. And the reason that she's been charged, they say it's that South Korean intelligence officers bought her some sushi, bought her some handbags. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But it's because she's aligned with South Korea. She is the best friend and a diplomatic channel between South Korea and the American intelligence, the American government, various American administrations. And what is very clear is that South Korea is not cooperating with what the Biden administration wants. The Biden administration wants South Korea to escalate against North Korea right now and against Russia. And they're doing it a little bit, but they're not doing it as much. Ever since Putin went to North Korea and ever since those weapons deals were signed and all of that, the Biden-Harris administration has demanded that South Korea just amp it up. And South Korea was willing to amp it up some, and they have amped it up some, but they don't want to go along with it. And they're desperate to do this. And so it looks like they have retaliated against one of South Korea's best friends in Washington, D.C., Sume Terry. Now, the fact that they would go as far as trying to prosecute her shows that what Donald Trump said on the space tonight, bragging about peace on the Korean Peninsula, saying he would continue that peace process, that shows that there is probably a huge amount of support for that in South Korea. South Korea doesn't want to go along with the anti-Russia and anti-North Korea drive of the Biden administration. I was at the World Youth Festival, and there were, when I was at the World Youth Festival in Sochi, Russia, there were South and North Koreans there. South Korea does business with China like you wouldn't believe. They do business with Russia like you wouldn't believe. They probably do business with America more than the other two, but they are heavily invested with both America and with Russia and with North Korea and with China. So, it makes sense that South Korea is saying, look, okay, we don't like North Korea. Okay, yeah, but, we're not going to escalate. And that, again, could lead in a good direction. So, I think the ideal scenario would be Trump winning the election, but doing so in opposition to the state. I think the most likely election is Trump taking office and the bad aspects of Trumpism getting amped up. And I think the worst case scenario would be Kamala Harris winning and just kind of enacting a crackdown on dissent. We're at the point where it's very clear that the faction behind Kamala Harris, they don't believe in free speech anymore. And they don't. The British government is now saying that they will extradite American citizens for their social media posts, because this awful racist riot happened. Tim Walz said that you should not have free speech if you spread misinformation, which is what they consider anti-imperialism to be. If you stray from their foreign policy, they consider that Russian disinformation. So basically they want to outlaw the speech of anyone who's anti-imperialist. I would view at this point Trump as being the lesser of two evils. And I think that he will win the upcoming election. And I think that the best, I think that most of the ruling class is going to kind of come to terms that with probably what their best bet is to let Trump win, make it look like a huge revolution. The people, kind of like Obama, right? When Obama got in, it was a revolution against Bush. Yes, we can. But they nudged Obama in their direction, and that they'll do the same thing. especially because Donald Trump survived the assassination attempt. Donald Trump very clearly looks like the underdog, and he is the underdog to some degree or other, but they'll start betting on Trump. And as we get closer to the election, Trump will appear more and more like a revolutionary, and the energy will be with Trump, and it'll be Trump fighting the media that's against him. It'll be Trump fighting the social media apparatus and the deep state that's against him, and they'll amp up the energy around Trump, but they will nudge that energy in a bad direction. That is my prediction about what will most likely happen. And in that situation, we have to be strategic. Now, I have said many, many times that I have absolutely no intention of retreating into leftism, right? That would be a huge mistake because Trump is promoting the anti-establishment energy. And leftism at this point is just defense of the establishment, right? That's what it means to be a leftist. It means that you know all the politically correct rules, you know all the countries to hate, you know all the LGBTQ, XYZ, all the things to check off, right? I believe people have the right to be who they are. I believe that, people, I'm not against, I don't think LGBT people should be prevented from doing anything. And, but I also think that's not what we should be focusing on. And that the left, the so-called left, the woke left, has just kind of become the face of the establishment. Now, there's a big element of the establishment that is pivoting toward aligning with Trump. And if it looks like Trump is going to win, there will be more and more of the establishment that will pivot in that direction. And so we have to be strategic, right? We're not pretending Trump is an anti-imperialist. Trump murdered Qasem Soleimani, right? Trump moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. Trump did a lot of bad things as president, no question about it. There is a way to be nuanced about all of these things in the upcoming election. But yes, my feeling is that Trump is the lesser of two evils. Trump wants economic development. He is not a degrowther. And Trump has a lot of people aligned with him who do want world peace. That's kind of how I see things. And the main thing we need to do right now, and again, I wish I could give you all a quick fix. Everyone wants a quick fix, right? With Israel-Palestine, they want a quick fix. With everything, everyone wants a quick fix. Unfortunately, the problems that the world is facing right now are not quick fixes, and the problems in American politics don't have a quick fix. What American politics needs is we need a dedicated core of anti-imperialists. We need a group of people who are anti-imperialist first. They're not Trump supporters. They're not Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals. They are anti-imperialists. That is what we need. We need a core of people who see imperialism, the monopolistic global financial system, as the main danger and can carry out operations that are aimed at opposing imperialism and winning average Americans to see that imperialism is the enemy and that America as a country will get better as we break with imperialism and as we move toward having a government of action that fights for working families. Well, something like that is not something you can set up overnight. It's very difficult to set that up, right? And we have done amazing things as CPI, and we've got some amazing things in the works, and we can do them all. But it requires patience, right? It's not easy. It is not easy to do what we have done. And it's going to require patience on our part, but we are transitioning. And I guess I will address some organizational issues. I'm not saying anything new here tonight, but I guess I will say that, first things first, the training wheels are coming off. We have been saying in CPI, we need to recruit normal people. We need to become the kind of organization that doesn't recruit communists on the internet, but recruits normal people. Well, that's blatant at this point. The training wheels are coming off, right? We need to be the kind of organization who recruits people who would never in a million years go looking for this message. And the fact that we are now moving away from using the word communism, I think, is a plus. I went on a podcast this afternoon. I forget what it was. It was called The Homeless Left, The Homeless Romantic, something like that. And I talked about, I feel like our community, we take what's good about Marxism economic development, historical progress, the idea that we can get to the ultimate goal of a stateless, classless world of vast abundance, the understanding that capitalism is holding back humanity's potential, imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, wanting to align with the countries around the world that have broken out of imperialism, wanting to build a mass popular movement, demanding a government of action to fight for working families. That's what I take from Marxism, and that's the good. Right? The idea that we'll build a mass movement against war and imperialism, a mass movement to make a better country, to have a government that strengthens working people and empowers working people, and is, that's what I take from Marxism, right? Wokeism, Kamala Harris and all of that, they don't want any of that. What they take from Marxism is rebellion, the idea to just tear it down and unleash rage and sexual impulses. They take atheism and rejection of religion, the view that anyone who is religious is an authoritarian, evil something or other. They take, rage, vengeance, jealousy, resentment, this kind of, human rights agenda, spreading chaos around the world in the name of human rights. They take everything that's bad from Marxism and they forget the good, right? They support imperialism, right? They support U.S. wars to overthrow countries. They want the U.S. state to be silencing dissidents. They want less consumption. They want people to be poorer. The woke faction is everything good about Marxism they've rejected. They've only taken kind of the spiritual aspect of the rebellion. The desire for chaos, the desire for vengeance, the desire to punish people. That's, Kamala Harris, she was the queen of mass incarceration. And let me say, Donald Trump, I heard some of what he said about Kamala Harris on his stream tonight. He's pandering to conservatives. That is not the way he talks about Kamala Harris doesn't match. I mean, her father was a Marxist, but her father's denounced her. When she was prosecutor in California, she wasn't letting all the criminals out of jail. She was imprisoning all kinds of people, and she was presiding over the rise in incarceration. So a lot of the Trump narratives about Kamala Harris are not correct. But, that they don't need to appeal to me, right? I can tell you the way it is, right? And that, Kamala Harris was the queen of mass incarceration, and that matches the woke mindset. She doesn't care about other people. She just wants vengeance and punishment. And that little girl was her, and the world needs to understand how unfair, Kamala Harris, is a very dangerous person who has no concern about other people. The spiritual aspect of Marxism, the dialectical mindset does kind of lead to that. And I think you can see that from a lot of people in America who act that way, who claim the communist label. They themselves, they have this, hey, we're mad. We want to feel special. We want to get revenge. So we can just do whatever we want. We can lie to people. We can do whatever we want. So, and having been doing communist stuff my entire adult life, I have seen that there is, unfortunately, with all the anti-imperialist heroism of communists, with all the heroism of the labor movement and the great sacrifices that have been made and all that, there is, there is an aspect of the communist philosophy that brings out this kind of selfish vengeance, on the part of people. And that has nothing to do with Marx's economic theories, has nothing to do with Lenin's theory of imperialism. It just has to do with that red flag and that French Revolution rebellion aesthetic. And that's a whole nother conversation we can have another time. But, I think that what I heard when I listened to Donald Trump, what I heard was a belief in economic development. I heard good things about Ukraine. I heard good things about the Korean Peninsula. I heard very bad things about Israel and Iran. I heard that he wants economic development. I heard, criticism of the woke crowd, which it reflects the way the majority of Americans feel, criticism of political correctness, a feeling that the establishment is against him, right? Donald Trump is, he's the lesser of two evils in my view, and there's plenty of evil there. And that, people who vote third party are correct, that if you vote for the lesser of two evils, you still get evil. So I'm not going to repeat myself in great detail. But yeah, I mean, and the fact that Nick Fuentes, this racist, this guy that, says, talks a lot of ways I don't approve of, says a lot of things I totally disagree with. The fact that he mobilized all his supporters to say no war with Iran, good on him. Good on him. Right? And the fact that there's many people in the Trump camp who agree with Nick Fuentes and say no war in Iran, that's good. And it's good that Trump sees that there's people on his side who feel that way, and that there is, the conservative establishment is very solidly pro-Israel. But among average people who are Trump supporters, who are critical of, of political correctness and your average MAGA person, a lot of them are influenced by a belief that the Israel lobby has too much power and stuff like that. So, I mean, there are contradictions in all of this. I will say, and I do want to throw this out there. I was talking to a member of my family the other day, somebody I don't talk to them about politics the same way I talk to you all about politics, because they're coming from a completely different direction. This person's a Biden supporter. And I said this to them, and I think this is a good way of explaining it to people. I said there are big differences between Trump and Kamala Harris, but they're not the differences that are being articulated politically. There is a fight within the government right now, and it's not about what Kamala Harris says she believes and what Donald Trump says he believes. It's about different people within the government apparatus, different sections of the FBI, different sections of the military that are at odds with each other in a struggle for power. And I said that to a member of my family, and they kind of nodded like, huh, that's interesting. I have never thought of that before. And that's actually a good way to explain it to people who maybe don't get it, right? And because it's true, right? At the end of the day, yes, Kamala Harris says this. Yes, Donald Trump says that. But the real difference is there are people in the Pentagon who want Trump. There are people in the FBI and CIA who want Trump. There are people in the FBI and the Pentagon who want Biden. And there are people in the FBI and the Pentagon who want Biden. There's people in the military who want Biden. And that the difference isn't really at this point about policy. The difference is about faction, that there is a fight within the American deep state between different factions. And the Trump faction, there's plenty of deep state people in with it. But the regime change color revolution apparatus, the people who spread chaos and did the Arab Spring, the people who murdered Gaddafi, the great African leader who built Libya and all of that, the people who murdered Gaddafi, the people who did the Arab Spring, the people who started the Ukraine conflict and escalated it to the point that it's at now, the people who want to prolong the Ukraine conflict indefinitely, the people who hated the fact that Donald Trump went to North Korea to have peace on the Korean Peninsula, those people are for Kamala Harris, and they are the main danger. And they're the people that are censoring the internet, and they are the people that are banning books and from Amazon, like my book, Kamala Harris and the Future of America, an essay in 3 parts. They are the ones that are putting Tulsi Gabbard on the terrorism watch list. They are the ones, they are the more authoritarian and more dangerous wing of the ruling class is with Kamala. And I mean, that is the case. So, take it or leave it. And, I don't campaign for anybody. CPI, we are not functioning as a nonprofit at this point. We will probably reincorporate at some point after the elections. Right now, we're just kind of a community of people that's dedicated to carrying things out. And we're dealing with a period of organizational transition. That's very important because we need a community of anti-imperialists. That is what we need. We need a community of anti-imperialists who can carry out real operations and build anti-imperialist consciousness among the American people and build up an apparatus, a network of people who can educate about anti-imperialism. That's not a quick fix, right? People want a quick fix. They want to say, oh, well, if I just vote this way in the election. No, look, either Kamala Harris or Trump, there's going to be some bad times ahead, right? I mean, the situation where Trump wins and acts like a real Bonapartist, that is a real long shot. But likely Trump wins, bad things will happen. Kamala Harris wins, bad things will happen. The future of the world is multipolarity. The future of the world is the rising economy around the world, and it's the American people and the the lower level capitalists and the small business owners and all that forming an anti-monopoly coalition to demand a government that aligns with Russia and China and breaks apart the big monopolies and fights for a new economy in America that's part of the pro-growth section of the planet, right? And that's not a quick thing. That's not going to happen tomorrow. And it requires people to actually join a real community, actually, support each other, actually learn to work with each other and learn to be patient. And none of that is easy. Right. And I'm at the point where, I don't like get rich quick schemes. There are no shortcuts in this world. And honestly, CPI, we've been using shortcuts for a long time. We've been relying on internet stuff. We've been relying on prominent people to boost us and stuff like that. And it's over. You know what I mean? We need to transition to become the real anti-imperialist community that carries out real operations that is really needed right now. That's what we need to be. And there is no other shortcut, right? And I don't know what more to say about it, right? We just have to go out and do what we need to do. And so we're doing it, and we're figuring out how to do it. We're still having our Saturday Zoom calls. We're having morning messages every morning to tune into, and we are, as a group, we are moving in a good direction. And you know what? I mean, look, we are solid as ever, and we got some good stuff planned for the DNC. We got some good stuff planned. We're supporting the Uhuru movement when their trial starts on September 3rd. We're definitely supporting them. And we're planning to do some workshops this fall, for new people that are around us. We got some good stuff in the works. Peter Coffin's got a new documentary coming out. We may be doing something. There's an idea of something we can do in New York City. In the next coming months. We're kind of figuring all of that out. But these are rough times, and we just have to do the best that we can. So I have been very open. In fact, these streams exist to bring you into a community. And if you want to join the community, at this point, to join CPI, if you go to our website, there's an email address that you can join. And, if you join that email address, if you email that email, people will follow up with you about joining, right? And that's the way we're functioning right now. And that's because we're in a state of organizational transition. We need to work things out. That's the way these things work. So yeah, right. Good times, good things happening. We just got to focus on the task at hand. Again, I do predict, I will repeat what I've said before on these streams, which is, Charlottesville was allowed to happen. It's not that everyone who did there is blameless. There was, that guy who drove his car into Heather Heyer, and, obviously the people who did Charlottesville are responsible for their actions. But I remember, I was a journalist at the time, Charlottesville blew up insanely beforehand in a way that normally protests like that don't blow up. And on top of that, in addition to that, there were no police dividing the people, right? That's weird, but it is what it is. January 6th. Now, again, doesn't make the people blameless, but a lot of people went to Washington, D.C. to support Donald Trump. Donald Trump said, "I'll meet you at the Capitol," and the doors to the Capitol were left open, and the police let people come on in. Again, that doesn't make people not responsible for their actions, but it was allowed to happen. It was enabled to happen. This recent racist riot in Britain, very similar thing. Again, people did bad things, and no question, the people who did what they did are responsible, but it blew up like you wouldn't believe. This false claim that it was a Muslim who was responsible for this murder, all of that, it blew up like you wouldn't believe, and a bunch of people were assembled in a place, and obviously some very awful things happened, And social media kind of arranged for it to happen. And January 6th, Charlottesville, and this recent racist riot in Britain, these are situations where social media blew up and assembled people in a certain place so that kind of a spectacle could be made of them in order to justify a government clampdown and to demonize certain political sectors, Trump supporters, conservatives in Britain, in order to demonize certain sectors of society, a spectacle was kind of arranged. Now, what I urge everyone watching this stream to be careful with, right, is to not get caught up in a spectacle before the upcoming election. I'm seeing some weird things. I'm not going to go into detail about them, but I would urge you, be very, 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 did I say very careful getting caught up in a spectacle, right? I would urge you to be very careful, right? Because I feel like both the Trump faction and the Kamala faction will try to arrange January 6th, Charlottesville-like events to further their narratives. And my advice is, lie low. That's my advice. Don't get caught up in it, right? There's some people from CPI that are going to the DNC protests, but they're there to do what we were planning to do. And I said to them, if it gets close to the police line, just get out of there, right? Just get out of there. We don't want anything. And I urge you to be very, very careful. Be very, very careful because, in order to justify the clampdown that seems to be desired from many different sides of the American deep state right now, right? I mean, the Kamala side is the most blatant about it, but there are people in the Trump camp who want a big clampdown on dissent right now. Marco Rubio wants a big clampdown on dissidents and anti-imperialists, right? Right now, Marco Rubio wants a big clampdown. He's a Trump supporter, but he is calling for all kinds of political repression, and he's a big Zionist, big supporter of war with Iran. I would just urge you, whether it comes from the Kamala Harris side or the Trump side, just don't get caught up in some kind of provocation that is intended to create a spectacle to justify police repression. Right? A lot of people on January 6th thought it would be fine to walk into the Capitol, and look what happened. A lot of people in Charlottesville thought they were going to a rally where there'd be a big police line and no one would get hurt, and that's not what happened, right? A lot of people in Britain that are, maybe anti-immigrant racists thought they were going to an anti-immigrant protest, and they instead ended up going to an event where a lot of people were hurt and a lot of awful things were done. And I don't think that every person who went to that racist riot is responsible for everything that was done there. Now, obviously, I don't think building a movement against immigration is a good thing to do, but I think there were probably a lot of people who got assembled by social media that were part of the crowd in Britain, that were there that probably would not do anything near what some of the awful things that were done. So my advice to you is watch what you get involved with and don't be part of a spectacle, right? I would, especially in the lead up to this upcoming election, avoid being part of a spectacle, right? If it looks like social media is arranging some kind of spectacle, my advice, get out of there, right? Obviously, big gatherings, protests, you want to have people there to do outreach, and there's reasons to go to these things, to meet people, etc. But my advice is, if there's some kind of spectacle being arranged by social media, some big gathering is going viral and everyone's being assembled at one point, stay the hell away from that, right? That's my advice. And I'm going to repeat this on many, many different streams, because if something happens, which I have a feeling something's going to happen, and I don't think my channel is big enough that it will not happen because, I said it on this channel. I want people to see that I told them about it, right? I talk to people, right? I wrote my book about Kamala Harris because I got information about Kamala Harris. There's nothing in the book that's like a big reveal or anything. Someone tipped me off about Kamala Harris's father, told me to look into it, right? I got tipped off about BreadTube. and how BreadTube was an American intelligence operation, how Steve Hassan was advising them, how it was like, and I ended up being more right than ever because I have people that I talk to. Part of my job as a journalist, part of my job as someone who travels around the world and writes books and all that is I talk to people from many different political spaces. That is my job. And, I get access to information sometimes, not, huge groundbreaking inside things, but I was right about BreadTube. I said that BreadTube was an intelligence operation, right? That BreadTube was, that this was some kind of, effort to control socialist politics, from a faction of the American state. And that part of why that was the case was that Dr. Steve Hassan, who was a long time known intelligence asset, that he was advising them, that Vosh and ContraPoints and Thought Slime and all of them were getting advised by Dr. Steve Hassan and his associates in the exiting extremism, cult deprogrammer universe. They were advising the socialist personalities, BreadTube. I said that, and I was widely mocked and ridiculed. Oh my God, how can you say that? Well, I was right. ContraPoints did a show with Hillary Clinton. PhilosophyTube was proven to be on the payroll of British intelligence. I was right. Now, I was right because my sources were right, because I had good information. I pointed to the evidence that I could see, and then Gray Zone revealed about PhilosophyTube, and then, after that, then Hillary Clinton, embraced ContraPoints, and at that point, it became blatantly obvious, and they started bragging about how they were funded by Soros, and there it was. So I was right, and I've been right about a lot of things. I don't want to go over everything I was right on because honestly, in a lot of cases, I wish I wasn't right. There were things that I thought CPI should do a couple years ago that there was not will within the organization to do it. There were people in our organization who just didn't have the will to do it. And looking back on it, we should have done it. And I mean, I was right. I wish I hadn't been right. But, I've been saying for a long time, we need to take off the training wheels. We need to recruit people in real life. I've also been saying some other things for a while. And I realize now, even though I was even kind of convinced by people in CPI who said, we shouldn't take these moves. Honestly, if we had taken the moves that I was thinking we should take, we might be in a better spot. And I kind of am looking back and saying, oh, well, maybe we should have, but whatever. It is what it is. I tend to get inside information, right? I am connected with people who know stuff. I knew about Kamala Harris. I wrote my book about Kamala Harris 4 years ago, and I knew about BreadTube, and, I tend to know this stuff. So what I am being told is that it looks like some kind of January 6th like operation, multiple January 6th like events might take place in the lead up to this election. I hope that's wrong. I don't want to see innocent people. I don't want to see people tricked into becoming a spectacle to use to justify clampdown. But what people I talk to are speculating about is that in both the Kamala Harris and Trump wings of the government, there is a desire to see political repression take place after the election, and that some kind of January 6th like events would be necessary in order to get the public to go along with it, to create public sentiment to support it. That is the information that I am getting from the people that I am talking to. That is speculation that I'm getting from people that talk to people that talk to people. It's like, I don't have any facts. I don't have any receipts. I'm telling you, based on the people that I talk to who tend to follow this kind of thing, that is what they are speculating about right now, that some kind of J6 like events, which could come from the Trump wing or the Harris wing, to justify political repression after the elections or in the lead up to the current election is in the works. And so I'm warning you all because I care about you all. I actually care about you all. You all aren't just anonymous clicks and likes. You all aren't just an opportunity for me to make lots of money. You all are actually, I care about you. right? The crew of people who watch these streams, the crew of people that buy my books and are joined our CPI community or helping build this movement. I care about your safety. I don't want you to get caught up in it. I don't want you to get caught up in what looks, there's some, honeypot kind of stuff, possibly in the works, some provocations. I don't want you to get caught up in it. So I'm saying very carefully, and I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. Right? I have said things in the past, and don't get caught up in it. Right? Don't get caught up in it. That's my advice. I would urge you that if you see something that looks like it could be a spectacle, don't go there. Right? Don't go there. It's interesting, but sometimes a smaller protest can be way more valuable than a big one. And I'll just share this before I start answering people's questions. Years ago, I was involved in a very small protest in New York City. It was against the movie Red Dawn. The movie Red Dawn came out. It was a movie about North Korea invading the United States. I was a member of the Workers' World Party. Occupy Wall Street had just happened a couple years, like maybe a year before. And so we had a protest against the movie Red Dawn. We got North Korean flags. We got pictures of Kim Il-sung. And we protested the movie Red Dawn. There were about 15 people there. Not very many. That protest got more attention than any protest I had ever done at that time. Why? Because we were in your face in front of the movie theater in Times Square with North Korean flags defending North Korea. And it was bold and it was big and it got a huge amount of attention. I had my long hair and my beard. I'll probably even show you video of it sometime. Not tonight, I don't think. But, that protest was a big deal. And it was shown on North Korean television. The North Koreans found the video on YouTube and ended up showing it on television. A couple of years later, the North Koreans published an article that I wrote. They pulled it from a Russian magazine and published it in their newspaper. It was a really big deal that I did that. It was a really small protest. Now, there are much bigger protests that I've been to, on Trayvon Martin, when I was in a crowd of thousands of people in New York City marching about Trayvon Martin. But honestly, in some cases, a small protest that hits hard makes a much bigger difference than going along with the mob, right? Because look, when Trayvon Martin, what happened, Occupy Wall Street and all that, those protests were going to happen anyway. And their message was very watered down and all of that, but a small rally that has a big punch, right? Sometimes it can be effective. Right. So, you just have to be strategic. You have to be strategic. And my advice would be obviously I'm not going to stop anybody from speaking up against war. I'm not going to discourage anyone from speaking up against war, speaking up for the Palestinians, anything like that. I would just urge you to not let yourself get caught up in something January 6th-ish, something that could be used as a spectacle to justify repression. So if that wasn't, that might have been kind of incoherent there. I don't know. But anyway, it's been a long day, folks. But hey, all's good. So hit the like button. I almost said it. We don't care. We're not saying that no more. All right, let's answer people's, let's do a roll call. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. We're doing the roll call. Roll call. Who's with us tonight? Ryan in Kansas City. Joe in North Carolina. Chicago, John McCarthy. Penny in Minnesota. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Chris from West Virginia. Bella in California. Carter in Minnesota. Gabby in Chicago. Johnny in Kansas City. Dan Niswander from the LA area. Jenny Boris from Santa Cruz. Bob in Pacifica. Patrick Clearly in LA. Welcome. Chris in Salt Lake City, welcome. Kate, Portland, Maine. Doug in Santa Barbara. James Turner in Boise, Idaho. Foster in DC. Peter in Sweden. St. David's, Bermuda. Ken in Houston, Texas. Austin, Elliott. Chapala, Mexico. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Derek from Youngstown. Oh, it's been a while since I've been out in Youngstown. Teresa in Michigan. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations. Denver, Colorado. Mosin. Tony from Tasmania. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good to have you with us. Good to have you with us. Good times, folks. Good times. Good times. Good times. So I'm going to start answering people's super chat questions. I don't see any Rumble rants. So if there's a Rumble rant, I would answer, but I don't see any. But super chat questions, I will answer. I'll answer any Rumble rants that come in too. But yeah, keep the super chats rolling in. Let the good times roll, right? Flagstaff, Arizona. Camilla in British Columbia. Doug loves it. Well, we love you too, Doug. Good stuff. Steve in Boston. Welcome, Steve. Good to have you with us. There you go. AJ from NJ. Very, very good. Batch in Arizona. All right. Going to start answering people's super chats. First thing. Can you provide an analysis of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact? Specifically, Stalin's capture of Eastern Poland, his posture during the Second World War. I would encourage you, Grover Furr, he's written a number of books. The one that I got the most out of was called Blood Lies, and it was his refutation of Dr. Timothy Snyder's book, Bloodlands. And what I particularly enjoyed and got, what I got out of that book was, he goes over this claim that we've often heard. I've heard it my whole life, is that Stalin and Hitler invaded Poland together. Well, that just didn't happen. And one way that it didn't happen is the Polish government never declared war on the Soviet Union. When Hitler invaded Poland, the Polish government went into exile, and there was the Polish government in exile in Britain. They never declared war on the Soviet Union. And if they had felt that they had been illegally invaded by the Soviet Union, they would have declared war on the Soviet Union. But the Polish government that fled, the government in exile in Britain, did not ever declare war on the Soviet Union. So 1939, the Soviet Union had gone around to every major Western country, and they had tried to form an anti-Nazi, anti-fascist alliance. And France signed on to it for a little bit, from what I understand, and then changed their minds. And most of the Western countries didn't, all the Western countries, for the most part, just said no. The USA had the Neutrality Act, and Spain, the Spanish Republic, was overthrown by Franco, and you had the Spanish Civil War. But the Soviet Union and Mexico sent aid to Spain, but the rest of the world just kind of sat back and let Spain fall into the hands of Franco, who was aligned with Hitler during these years. And the Soviet Union said, okay, if the Western countries won't make a deal with us, we will align with, we will not align with, but we'll make a non-aggression pact with the Nazis. And they made the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact of 1939, and they drew a line down Europe. And the line was basically an agreement between the Soviet Union and the Nazis. You don't bring your army on one side of this line. We don't bring our army on the other side of it, right? And so 1939, when the Nazis invaded Poland, the Polish government collapsed, and the Nazis brought their forces right up to the line. And the Soviet Union, seeing that, the Nazis had invaded Poland, they brought their forces right up to the line. There was a handshake or whatever, but it wasn't a joint invasion. And that's that. And the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact bought time. It prepared the Soviet Union, gave them time to prepare. They knew that the invasion by the Nazis was inevitable, pretty much. Anna Louise Strong wrote the book The Soviets Expected It. And they knew that it was going to be inevitable. Inevitably, there would be an invasion. And so they prepared for it, and they bought time with the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and they didn't, there was no declaration of war on the Soviet Union, etc. And the Nazis invaded Poland, and then They moved their troops right up to the line. That's my understanding. Maybe somebody who's more of a World War II history buff than I am, they will know better. But my understanding, based on reading Grow Refer and reading Anna Louise Strong, that is my understanding. I'm not a historian, but I do know this history, So there you go. All right. Was Stalin and the USSR opposed to Malthusianism? Well, I would say yes. The fact that Stalin gave a medal to any woman who had more than 10 children, it was one of the highest medals. They had the mother of the Soviet Union. That is definitely not Malthusian, right? The Malthusians believe in overpopulation, and Stalin was actively trying to expand the population, right? The mother of the Soviet Union, for a woman who gave birth to more than 10 children, the Soviet Union was obsessed with increasing the birth rate, increasing the population. So that is by definition not Malthusianism. Now let me add, I will add that Marx wrote a polemic against Malthusianism in his book Theories of Surplus Value, and he ripped Robert Malthus, the guy who coined the term overpopulation. He ripped him to shreds, and there's other things that Marx wrote about Malthus. Marx was anti-Malthusian to his core. So was Stalin opposed to Malthusianism? Was the USSR opposed? I mean, if you're giving medals to people for having more than 10 children, sounds like you are. Now, in the 60s, once Khrushchev was in, and as things in the Soviet Union changed, I know that there was a huge increase in the rate of abortions. During the Stalin years, they actually outlawed abortion at one point. But I do know in the 60s in the Soviet Union, there was a lot of abortion. And so maybe the Soviet leaders' position on that changed. But you're asking about Stalin specifically. I see Stalin as against that. All righty. Elon and Trump interview was deep state testing Trump. Elon tried to redirect to aggressive foreign policy. Trump reiterated that he's a deal maker. That's good. Again, people say Trump is a narcissist. And I mean, why would Trump do what he's doing if he wasn't a narcissist? I mean, why would anyone go into politics in our time if they weren't, kind of looking for narcissistic supply? I think calling Trump a narcissist is not an own. It's just like, Kamala Harris is a narcissist, but she's a much more dangerous narcissist. I think pretty much every person on Capitol Hill, every presidential candidate is a narcissist on some level, right? That said, Donald Trump, his narcissism is, he wants to be remembered as a great leader. And so I hope that will have him understand that if he takes us to war with Iran, he's not going to be remembered as a great leader. If he takes us to World War III with China or Russia, he's not going to be remembered as a great leader. And I hope that his narcissism overrides whatever the people around him that want war, whatever the insane war lobby wants, That's an interesting analysis. I will say Elon, I was not thrilled with Elon. I liked hearing Trump more than Elon. And Trump, there were some things he said that I was not thrilled with. And I didn't hear the whole thing. And thanks for Carter for sending me the notes, the parts I didn't hear. And thanks to the person who shouted out to me about Nick Fuentes and the no war with Iran. Look, let me say this, right? Nowadays, everything on the internet is about personalities, right? People that are not good, people that I disagree with can do good things that are useful, right? I'm not embracing Nick Fuentes as a brand. I'm certainly not embracing his anti-Semitism, his white supremacy or whatever. But in this instance, he played a very good role, and never rule out the possibility of somebody doing good things, maybe with bad motivation, maybe, for whatever reason. Right. And I don't think we should be above saying that. Right. I think it was in AA, they say principles over personalities. And that has always been my position, right? Is that, principles over personalities. And like I said, there have been a lot of people who've dissed me over the years, and I would reconcile with them. Right. I don't want to make this about personalities. I'm trying to build an anti-imperialist movement. Now, unfortunately, there are people for whom this is all about personalities, and they don't They claim to agree with everything I say, but they fixate on hating me on a personal level, right? And that's the opposite of how one should operate in politics. And there's nothing I can do about that. But, I think to some degree or other that reveals them to be not honest actors, and, when people are being lied to about things that are said, and, I will say, I don't know. I'm not going to say anything more, right? Not going to say anything more because it's not productive. It really wouldn't be helpful for me to reflect on this more, because this is the problem. This is the problem. Like I can admit that Nick Fuentes, who I really don't like on a personal level and an ideological level, I can admit that he did a good thing. That's it, right? That's that. So, I think that's a good thing on my part. Now, if Nick Fuentes had gone out of his way to personally target me, that might be harder for me. But I feel like I should strive to be the kind of person who, even if Nick Fuentes had gone out of his way to diss me, I would still be able to say, you know what? Who cares? He still did a good thing. Not saying I'm there yet, right? But I'd like to think that I am. So there you go. But, and I will say, I will say this, right? If people are threatened by me, that's not an expression of strength. If people are so threatened by me that they have to act the way they're acting, and they can say that they're not threatened by me, but they clearly are, or else they would not be acting the way they're acting. If people are threatened by me, yeah, you're not in a position of strength, right? There's 200 people watching this live right now, not a huge number of people. There's CPI, we've got what, between 100 and 200 members. But if people are so threatened by me, right? They're so threatened by me, which they are. It's hilarious. It is absolutely hilarious that certain people are threatened by me. Yeah. Aziz is threatened by my nose. Just love Caleb's take. Yeah. I mean, I'll just say this. If people are so threatened by me, I mean, if you ever wondered if the internet is fake, I think that's pretty solid proof. Because people with all the followers in the world and all the likes and shit are terrified of me. And that seems to make me think that there's a lot of fake stuff on the internet, because people who have absolutely no reason, or shouldn't have any reason, to be terrified of me are terrified of me. And let's just be real, right? And the fact that I scare certain people, which, again, if they weren't scared of me, they would be acting very differently toward me. The fact that I scare certain people, you take from that what you will. And I'm sure they would deny it. Oh, no, we don't care about KLA. Well, you clearly do. You clearly do. And, look, we have been through so much as a community, right? Whatever we are, I am terrifying, Gabby, terrifying. Now, whatever we are, the City Building Tendency, Center for Political Innovation, the Innovationists, we have been through so much. And each time we go through some stuff, we get stronger, right? And, sometimes you find out who's really with you and who's against you. And I mean, honestly, we've been through so much, and each time we just kind of keep going. And, I mean, I am impressed, I guess, with the lengths that people go to try and cause us problems. And the fact that people that are supposedly in much stronger positions that shouldn't even have to acknowledge that we exist are acting the way they are. So, and I also want to say this, the Uhuru case is the most important case in American politics right now, right? These are a group of black revolutionaries who could be imprisoned simply because they, made anti-imperialist statements about Russia, right? And that's a very serious case. That's a very serious situation. And I think that deserves top priority. And I don't agree with the Uhuru movement on many, many things, but I still stand with them because I have principles. When I see people being attacked, when I see people possibly going to prison for 15 years, I don't care what their position is. I understand that you stand with them. That's what serious revolutionaries have always done. But that's not what jokers and phonies and frauds do. So, I don't know. I don't know what more to say. But I am flattered. I am deeply flattered by how scared certain people are of me. I am complimented. I am deeply honored. You know what I mean? Because it means we're getting some shit done. It means that, we're accomplishing some things. And if I was not a threat to certain people, they wouldn't act the way they're acting. So I mean, I'm disappointed in people. And honestly, I've been doing this long enough. I overestimate my political opponents. I expect people that are trying to outmaneuver me to be smarter than they are. And I am frequently disappointed. I expect the people that are trying to outmaneuver me to know how to maneuver. I expect people to be more two-faced, more effectively two-faced than they are. I mean, people can lie, sure, whatever. Not a shocker. People can be dishonest, yeah, sure. But I expect people to be smarter. And I mean, I look, I exist. I'm going to keep existing. And you know what? Anything could happen at this point, right? I totally expect that, who the hell knows what could happen at this point? When people are gunning for you, they do crazy shit. They could, I almost expect they're going to take a gay porn movie and put my head on one of the people and send it out of Caleb's a gay porn star or something, right? And that's how stupid some of these people are. But I know that our community will survive it. You know what I'm saying? I'm at the point where there are some people that are solid, that work with us, that have a relationship, that are trustworthy. And there are some people who aren't. And I'm at this point, hey, I exist on YouTube. I have my job as a reporter, and I have a community of people with which I want to carry out anti-imperialist operations. And I have some people that are very solid, and there are some people that aren't. And there are some people that will prove themselves over time or not. And we got shit to do, right? And I mean, at this point, I mean, there you go. There you go. I probably said way too much already, right? But it is what it is. I mean, I'm flattered. I am flattered by how threatened people are by me, that they would have to act the way they're acting. And they would deny, no, Caleb's not a threat to us. No. Okay. All right. Well, I'm sorry. Your actions clearly state otherwise. And other people can see that. You wouldn't need to act the way you're acting if I was not a threat to you. And, I don't want to be a threat to these people, but it is what it is, right? Yeah, so there you go. All right. Sorry about that, folks. I don't know. It is what it is. It is what it is. Next question. All right. Which way a second Trump goes depends a lot on where anti-imperialists in the U.S. fight and organize around issues. That is so true, John. We could have a very, very big impact. What we do, especially in a second Trump term, could have a very, very big impact. And part of, again, I repeat myself, but different people listen different times. Maturity. Part of being mature is knowing your own size. When a baby is first born, it thinks it's the most powerful thing that exists. It cries and it gets food, but you gradually, as you come into maturity, you realize your own strength. You realize how big you are. You realize what you are capable of doing, what your strengths are, and all of that. And part of maturity is going, okay, this is what I am capable of doing. This is what I am not capable of doing. And one thing that I have critiqued communists and leftists and anti-imperialists in the US for is that a lot of them suffer from a dual, they don't know their own strength, and they aren't testing themselves, and they aren't figuring out their own strength. A lot of the way various communists, and this is not talking about anyone I'm dealing with recently. This is just a general critique that I've been making for years, right? It's almost the equivalent of like somebody who's sitting on their couch, not going anywhere. And then they develop a fantasy. I could run a marathon. And they sit there and they dream of running a marathon. And then they go back to sitting on the couch. That's what most communists do. Most people in the United States that call themselves communists, they're sitting on the couch. They're not going anywhere. And then they develop this fantasy. I could run a marathon. And they envision the marathon. And they go back to sitting on the couch. Well, if you're currently on the couch and you are not an athlete, the chances of you actually running a marathon are quite slim. But if you're sitting on the couch and you say, you know what, I want to get up and go to the store, that is a real realistic thing that one can do. And that part of being politically, part of coming into maturity is going, okay, how can I intervene in the political process? How can I intervene in the political process effectively, right? How can I intervene in the political process effectively? What can I actually do? Now, if you say, oh, I'm going to run for president and win, well, unless you're pretty solidly in a good position, that's pretty rare. But what can you do to actually intervene in the political process? How can you win? Right? Well, what can you do? And that's what CPI has always been about. We sit there and we say, what can we do to actually promote anti-imperialism, actually change things? What can we do? And then we go out and do it, and we learn from what we did, and we think, what else can we do? We go out and do something else. The Libertarian Party convention was happening, and Donald Trump was speaking at it. And I thought, that's pretty cool. Angela McCurdle, the head of the Libertarian Party, is a friend of mine. What can we do? And I said, we could make a book. And so I wrote it. Peter Coffin helped me edit it. Carl the Trinket Man helped me lay it out. Went to my a printer that I know, and we made 1,000 copies of it. My friend Peter, got in the car with him, called up a few friends in DC. We drove down to the Libertarian Party convention, and we handed out 1,000 copies of it. That was something that we were capable of doing, and we did. Great. That's generally, that is being mature. You say, what could we do? And I said, well, we do have the capacity to print a pamphlet. I do have the capacity to write. My friend has a car who can get us to DC. We have a couple volunteers in DC we can work with. Shout out to them, by the way, if they're watching. Everyone deserves credit, Shout out to Carl the Trinket Man. Shout out to Peter Coffin. Shout out to Peter, my friend who drove down. We went down to DC and we handed them out. And we left our mark on the Libertarian Party convention. We thought, this is what can we realistically do? We envisioned it. We figured out the logistics of how we can do it, and we did it. That is the art of being serious about politics. You don't sit on the couch all day and every so often fantasize about running a marathon. You think, what can I realistically do? You get things in order to do it, and you do it. That's what CPI has always been about. Right? And you start small and you learn, okay, well, we can do this. We can do this. You push yourself, you challenge yourself. Maybe you set a goal and you don't reach it. That's the way we've always operated. From what I understand, this is actually similar to what Lyndon LaRouche said, which is so weird. I've never been in the LaRouche organization. I've been accused of being a LaRoucheite many times, but my understanding is that when his organization started out, they called politically intervening, they called it laboratory work, and they compared it to like a science experiment. And that, look, John, the kind of things that anti-imperialists do, could make a huge difference. That's what John is saying, right? The kind of things that we do, going to the Libertarian Party convention and handing out 1,000 of these, confronting Tsai Ing-wen on the streets of New York City, having a summit against hypocrisy to counter the summit for democracy. There's many things we've done over the years, monitored elections in different countries. I was in Venezuela in 2015. I monitored the election. I was in Nicaragua, and, we sent a delegation to Nicaragua to monitor the elections there. There are various things we can do, right? We had rallies to free Alex Saab, to raise Alex Saab, the awareness about that case. There's many things that we can do. We did them. Easy, right? Not easy, but that's the science of this. What can we actually do? And then you do it. That's why we've always existed. And what John McCarthy is saying is that what we do in a second term of Donald Trump could have a very big impact, because Trump is being pushed and pulled in many different directions. And, and I think John is absolutely right. And that sometimes when the political situation is as weird as it is, and there are big divisions in the ruling class, strategic interventions, little nudges, can actually get things done in a good way. So I think John is absolutely right. And that we shouldn't just assume we can do nothing. And we shouldn't just have this fantasy that we're going to, and we'll rise up and and we'll build the new vanguard party and we'll seize power. And no, that's not going to happen either. Right? Maybe it'll happen eventually, but it's not something you can realistically do at this time. And a lot of people that I know, I'm not even talking about politics now, just in regular life, they get caught up in this. I can't do anything to improve my life. Oh, here's this unrealistic fantasy. I'm going to be a famous actor, on Broadway or something. And it's like, wait a second, hold up. If you want to accomplish things in this world, you think of what can I do, and you do it. And then from there, you improve on it and you do it again, or you do it better. That's the process. That's maturity, right? It's learning your own strength, learning your own size, etc. And with your own strength and with your own size, doing the best you can, right? And it would seem kind of like common sense, but it's where a lot of people get stuck. They get stuck with only making very unrealistic plans, trapping themselves in assuming they're incapable of doing anything, they can't advance, right? Just this demoralization, this bitterness, and that is a place I never want to be. Wallace Wattles, go and read Wallace Wattles, right? The Science of Being Great, The Science of Getting Rich, that stuff is good, right? I love Wallace Wattles. All right, next question. Trump ditched much of his populism since 2016. Yes and no. Trump goes back and forth. Trump is all over the place. And let me say, I am totally willing to admit I am not a blind apologist for Donald Trump. Murdering Qasem Soleimani, moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, anti-immigrant rhetoric, anti-Islamic rhetoric, plenty of awful things about Trump, right? And I am saying that I think Trump is the lesser of two evils for very nuanced and careful reasons that I spent the opening hour of this stream explaining. And that's something that, again, a lot of people on the internet, no one wants nuance. Nobody wants nuance. Everybody just wants, the scandal. You're with this team. No, you're with this team. And I'm not here to do that. I am an intelligent person, and I wish, they say the truth is stranger than fiction, right? It would be easier if I could just go, yes, I'm on this team, but no, I mean, we have to understand the nuances of all these things. Next question. What was the CIA's relationships to James Baldwin? I would recommend you read the book Finks, How the CIA Tricked the World's Greatest Writers, which I have that book somewhere on this bookshelf. James Baldwin, I believe, if I remember correctly, he was an African-American intellectual who was, pro-civil rights, but anti-communist. And he was very critical of the United States and the way it treated African Americans. And the CIA set up a magazine called the Paris Review, which was part of the Congress for Cultural Freedom program. And if I remember correctly, the Paris Review started promoting James Baldwin, right? If I remember correctly, that's where they kind of made him famous. He was a very good writer, very eloquent writer, and he was an African-American critic of U.S. society, and he was anti-communist. And so they boosted and inflated him because they wanted him to be the voice of the Black freedom struggle, not Paul Robeson, not William L. Patterson, not communists. Because that's what the CIA's Congress for Cultural Freedom program was all about, was, inflating certain people to going to end this soon, but inflating certain people. And that is my understanding, is that through Paris Review, which was a CIA funded magazine, they boosted and made the career of James Baldwin as a literary voice among African Americans who was critical of U.S. society, but was anti-communist. How close did JFK get to working out peace with the USSR? Well, at the time of JFK's death, he had announced he wanted the moon mission to be between the Soviet Union and the United States. He wanted a joint mission to the moon, a Soviet astronaut and an American astronaut on the same space shuttle to go to the moon. That the goal was to reach the moon, but he said he didn't want the USA to reach the moon by itself. He wanted them to team up with the Soviets. And that he was pivoting in a much more peace with Russia direction at the time of his death. Now, there was the Cuban Missile Crisis. There was the Bay of Pigs invasion. Kennedy was not an anti-imperialist. Let's be real about this. There were differences, though. He didn't want to escalate in Vietnam. He wanted to negotiate more with the Soviets. It's complicated. But, this is an argument. This is one of the standard fallacies is, well, Kennedy was not an anti-imperialist. Hey, Bay of Pigs, Cuban Missile Crisis, coups. I mean, yes, that's true. Kennedy was not an anti-imperialist. So based on that, there could not have been a wider conspiracy to assassinate and blah, blah, blah. No, there are differences among the ruling class. There are differences among the imperialists, right? And it's kind of like the people in the chat that are all saying Trump is not an anti-imperialist. You are correct. Trump is not an anti-imperialist. Let me say that again, in case anyone claims I didn't say that. Trump is not an anti-imperialist. He is not an anti-imperialist. But there are differences between Trump and the other imperialists. And Trump has his own self-interests, and that leads me to believe he is the lesser of two evils. But we can acknowledge that, there could be conspiracies against Trump, even though he's not an anti-imperialist, because there are differences among the imperialists. Just because somebody becomes a target of the deep state doesn't mean they're good, right? That it doesn't mean that they're all good, and you don't refute the idea that they might be the target of the deep state by going, well, they're not all good. No, the deep state doesn't only target people that are all good. There are differences among them. I don't think they think Trump is some kind of heroic anti-imperialist who's going to stand up to them. I think they think Trump is a liability. That is their main issue with Trump. He's a liability. He won't do what they say. He's unpredictable and he is very selfish. And Trump is more concerned with his reputation and how he's remembered by history than he is with being a team player of American foreign policy. And that's what, Mad Dog Mattis, I believe, said when he resigned. Was that the general who resigned, Mattis? is they see Trump as somebody who is not a team player with their foreign policy agenda. He doesn't take orders from the American foreign policy establishment. He does sometimes. But, that's, Anya Parampil, who wrote her book about Venezuela. She highlighted disagreements between Trump and John Bolton related to Venezuela, and that it's nuance, right? And that just saying the deep state, or at least a big chunk of the deep state, is out to get Trump, which is true, right? I think there's big sections of the deep state that are with Trump too. It's not like there's one entity called the deep state and it's against Trump. No, there are different factions within the American state apparatus. There's a big section that really opposes Donald Trump, and there's a big section that doesn't. And there are differences, within the ruling class, and that, just pointing out that there is a conspiracy against Trump, which I would argue there is, doesn't mean that therefore Trump does everything right. And you don't then refute that by pointing to bad things that Trump did. That's not the argument here, right? The argument is that the most powerful factions of the ruling class see Trump as a liability, as unreliable, etc. Okay. Based on that, I would say Donald Trump is probably better, because I don't want them to carry out their agenda of creating a low-wage police state and marching us toward World War III. I don't want the imperialist global financial system to get stronger. I don't want that. What I want is working families in the United States to be empowered. I want to see more anti-imperialism, and I eventually like to see a movement in this country to rebuild America, to be part of the new economy that's rising around the world. I think we need a government of action that will fight for working families. That's what I think we need. So there you go. And I think for what I would like to see, not World War III, not war with Iran, not war with Russia, peace on the Korean Peninsula, not Facebook censorship, not political repression. Trump is a better bet. Could Trump do all of those things? Absolutely. I am not here to defend Trump and say he was a good president. I am here to say that he sounds, based on my assessment, like the lesser of two evils. And that's that. So, and I've said that over and over again, and I will keep saying it because I believe it. I believe Trump is the lesser of two evils. And, I could be wrong, and he could still be an awful president. But honestly, I think John hit the nail on the head with his super chat when he says what we do could actually have a big impact. And we're far more likely to impact a Trump presidency than we are to impact a Kamala Harris presidency, because Trump has much more of an independent streak than Kamala Harris does. Kamala Harris is their robot. They have programmed her. They know how to play her like a flute. Trump, not so much. So there you go. That's what I said. That's what I said. And yeah, folks, tomorrow night I'm streaming with Terry, right? We're going to talk about Alaska, and we're going to talk about Kamala Harris's religious beliefs, etc. So it's going to be fun tomorrow night. I think I'm doing an interview tomorrow. I think I have an interview lined up for tomorrow as well. A lot of things are going on in this world. I am going to try personally to take it easy as much as I can until the election is over. I really wish this election was over, because the 2016 election was a big deal. The 2020 election was weird. I have never seen anything like this. And unfortunately, I think there's going to be a lot of fireworks and bumpy rides and weird shit before this election is over. And I really, wake me up November 5th. It is what it is. Right? Yeah, let's just keep going. And yeah. All right, folks. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.